Ethan had lived in the station for years, but today, something felt different. The usually quiet hum of the ship seemed louder as he walked through the empty hallways. He had gotten used to the silence, the isolation, but today there was an odd heaviness in the air. It was nearing the end of his shift when he finally returned to his quarters. The sun, or whatever passed for daylight on this distant planet, was setting in the sky, casting a dim glow through his small window. Ethan had grown used to the solitude of space travel, a simple life. A life with no one but the machines and the endless stars for company. He worked on maintenance, repaired what was broken, and spent the rest of his time reading or watching old shows on his tablet. The quiet was his companion. But that evening, something changed. As Ethan opened the door to his room, he was met with the sight of a woman sitting on his bed. She was relaxed, casual even, as if she had been there for hours. Her presence in the room felt so normal, so completely natural, that Ethan stopped dead in his tracks, his hand still on the doorframe. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The question felt foolish even as it left his mouth. After all, he was the only one who lived here, wasn't he? The woman, without a hint of surprise or concern, looked up at him. Her gaze was steady, calm, but something about the way she looked at him made Ethan feel like she had always been there, like this was exactly how things were supposed to be. There was an ease about her that made it hard for him to believe she wasn't a part of his life, even though he had never seen her before. "I'm Lyra," she said, her voice smooth and warm. "I've been watching you." Ethan blinked. "Watching me? What do you mean?" he asked, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't tell if she was serious or if this was some sort of prank. "I've been observing you," she continued, her words simple but deliberate. "Your thoughts, your actions, everything. I've been sent to understand your kind better." Ethan's confusion deepened. He had heard of some secret projects, of course. The government wasn't exactly transparent about everything that went on in the colony, but he never imagined something like this. He shook his head. "I don't understand. Why are you here?" He took a hesitant step into the room, still unsure whether he should be running for the nearest emergency button or sitting down to hear her out. Lyra smiled faintly, as if she were enjoying his confusion. But there was no malice in her smile, just an odd sense of calm. She patted the spot next to her on the bed, inviting him to sit. "I'm here because of you," she said. "You, Ethan, are special. Not because of anything you've done, though you've lived a good life, but because you're human." Ethan froze. "What do you mean, human?" I'm just a guy stuck on a space station living a quiet life." His voice trailed off, unsure of how to respond. Lyra tilted her head, her gaze soft but intense. "You may not know it, but you hold a great deal of importance in the grand scheme of things. I've been sent to study human emotions, and you're the perfect subject." Ethan felt his heart race. Was this some kind of experiment? "Emotions?" he asked, his voice growing shakier with each word. "Why me? There must be someone else. There's nothing special about me." "I disagree," she said simply. "You are a unique individual, Ethan. You represent a lot of what makes humans different. The way you feel, the way you care about things. It's what sets you apart from everything else in the universe." She leaned back slightly, the air between them almost charged with some unknown energy. Ethan couldn't explain why, but it felt like she knew everything about him. His quiet fears, his hopes, his dreams. It was as if she had been watching him for a long time, and yet he'd never seen her before. The feeling was both strange and oddly comforting. "I don't understand," Ethan muttered. His mind was spinning, trying to piece together the fragments of the situation. Lyra sighed gently, like she had expected this reaction. She stood up from the bed and walked toward him, her movements fluid, graceful. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost hypnotic. "I'm not from around here, Ethan," she said, pausing just inches from him. "I'm from a place far beyond your understanding. I've been sent to observe, to understand and to learn about humans. Your species has potential that could change the future of this galaxy." Ethan's mind reeled. Potential? Change the future? He was just a regular guy, wasn't he? He glanced at Lyra, feeling his pulse quicken. There was something unsettling about her, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. But despite the confusion, despite the fear, he found himself captivated by her presence. Her calm, her confidence. It was like she was meant to be here, meant to be with him. "I'm not sure what you want from me," Ethan said, his voice shaky but steadying. "But I don't know anything about potential. I'm just trying to get by." Lyra smiled, the smile more knowing than before. "That's the thing, Ethan. You don't need to understand it right now. All you need to do is trust me. Trust that you have a role to play, one that you've been preparing for your whole life." He swallowed hard, looking at her as if he could somehow unravel the mystery of her existence. But the more he looked, the more he realized that there was no simple explanation for what was happening. Everything about her felt so real, so right. And yet everything about this situation screamed that it was impossible. "You'll come to understand," Lyra said, her voice warm and assuring. "It will all make sense soon enough." Ethan wanted to argue, to question everything, but something inside him told him that it wasn't time for that. Instead, he simply nodded, his mind still racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was no accident, that Lyra's arrival had been inevitable. And just like that, as he stood there, she seemed to settle into his world as though she had always been a part of it. A strange sense of peace washed over him, and before he knew it, he found himself sitting down beside her on the bed. "Are you going to explain everything to me?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra smiled, a knowing smile, her eyes twinkling with something he couldn't name. "Soon, Ethan. Soon." And as the quiet hum of the station filled the space around them, Ethan felt a sense of calm settle over him. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel so alone. Ethan sat quietly beside Lyra, her calm presence oddly comforting in the silence of his room. His mind was spinning. She was here, claiming to have been watching him for a long time, and that somehow he was part of something much bigger than he could ever have imagined. But why him? Why this quiet man, living on a lonely space station in the far reaches of the galaxy? Lyra didn't seem in any hurry to explain further. She had already shared the basics. She was not from around here. She was an observer sent to study humans, and apparently, Ethan was an important part of her mission. He glanced at her, unsure of how to continue the conversation. Her eyes, glowing softly in the dim light of his quarters, were full of a mysterious understanding that made him feel small, yet oddly special. "Why me?" Ethan finally asked, his voice breaking the heavy silence. "Why am I important? I'm just a guy trying to get by. I don't think I'm the kind of person you should be watching." Lyra smiled, a soft, reassuring smile. She had already told him her reasons, but he needed to hear it again. "You're important, Ethan, not because of anything you've done, but because of what you represent. You are human, and humanity holds more potential than you can imagine. Your species is still young, still finding its place in the stars, but you—" She paused, her gaze intense. "You are part of something bigger than you know." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "I don't understand." "What do you mean, bigger? What are you really here for?" Her smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet seriousness. "I'm here to understand your emotions, your ability to form connections. There's a richness in your species and emotional depth that is unlike any other. And that depth holds the key to the future of the galaxy." The weight of her words settled on Ethan's chest. "The future of the galaxy?" He repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. "But I'm just a maintenance worker on a space station. I'm not special." Lyra leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "Ethan, you are special. You may not see it now, but every choice you make, every moment you live, is shaping the future of humanity. And as for your role in this galaxy, it is bigger than you think." Ethan couldn't wrap his mind around it. How could someone like him, someone who never thought about anything beyond fixing broken machines, be so important? There had to be a mistake. He looked down at his hands, unsure of what to do with them, as if the answers were hidden there. "I'm just me," he muttered. "I don't feel any different from anyone else." Lyra placed a hand gently on his arm. The touch was soft but firm, grounding him in the moment. "That's the beauty of it, Ethan. You don't need to feel different. It's not about feeling special. It's about understanding the potential inside you and how it connects with everyone around you." Ethan swallowed, trying to absorb her words. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was telling the truth. There was something about her, something almost otherworldly, that made him believe her. But he still didn't understand how it all fit together. "You're saying that my emotions, my feelings, are important to the future of the galaxy?" he asked, still trying to grasp the idea. Lyra nodded. Yes, your ability to love, to care for others, to form bonds, that's what makes humans so unique. Many species throughout the universe are logical, cold, even calculating. But humans? You have heart. You have the ability to feel deeply, to care for one another, and that is what will shape the future. Ethan let out a long, shaky breath. But what does that mean for me? For my life? I'm just a guy living here. I don't know what to do with all of this. Lyra's eyes softened with understanding. She could see the confusion in his face, the struggle in his voice. She had expected this. After all, Ethan was still just a man, and the weight of such a revelation would not be easy to bear. You don't have to understand it all now, Ethan, she said gently. But you have a choice. You can live your life the way you have been, quietly, unaware of the role you play. Or you can choose to embrace your potential and take part in something much bigger than yourself. Ethan looked at her, trying to make sense of her words. He felt a pull towards her, a connection he couldn't explain, but still doubt lingered in the back of his mind. He wasn't ready for such a huge decision. He had always kept to himself, avoided conflict, and just lived in peace. He had never wanted to be part of something that would change the galaxy. What if I'm not ready? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. There's no rush, she said finally. This isn't something that can be forced. You'll know when the time is right, but I'll be here and I will help you understand. You're not alone in this, Ethan. The room was silent for a long time, both of them lost in their thoughts. Ethan could feel the weight of her words, the gravity of her presence. He wasn't sure what the future held, but somehow being with Lyra felt right. It felt like this moment was meant to happen, but he wasn't ready to make any decisions. Not yet. I don't know what to do, he admitted, his voice filled with uncertainty. Lyra smiled softly. That's okay. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just know that you are not alone, and when the time comes, when you are ready, I will be here to guide you. Ethan nodded slowly, his heart still racing with questions. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same again. Lyra had come into his world, and he had no idea how or why, but somehow, he felt like this was just the beginning of something much larger than himself. He stood up from the bed, his legs feeling heavy, but his mind was clearer than it had been in days. I don't know what's next, he said quietly, but I'll try to trust you. Lyra stood as well, walking over to stand beside him. That's all I ask, Ethan. Trust will be the key to everything. And as the quiet hum of the station filled the space around them, Ethan knew that whatever came next, he wouldn't face it alone. The days following their conversation had been a blur for Ethan. Lyra stayed with him, always present, always just a few steps away. She had not pushed him for answers or decisions, but he couldn't help but feel that she was waiting for him to understand, waiting for him to accept the truth. He was living a quiet life, repairing machines, maintaining the station, but something had changed. His reality had shifted, and he could no longer pretend that everything was the same. Each day, as he went about his work, he found himself thinking more about the things Lyra had said. Her words echoed in his mind, constantly turning over, trying to make sense of them. The idea that his emotions, his ability to love and care, held the key to the future of the galaxy. It was a lot to take in, but despite his confusion, there was an undeniable pull to Lyra. She had become a part of his life in a way he couldn't explain, the way she seemed to understand him, the way her presence made him feel both uneasy and comforted at the same time. It was as if they were connected in some strange, unspoken way. One evening, after a long day of routine repairs, Ethan returned to his quarters to find Lyra sitting on his bed again. She looked as serene as ever, her eyes filled with a quiet knowing. She hadn't asked him about his thoughts or his progress. She never pressured him, but Ethan could sense that she was waiting for him to come to some realization. He sat down beside her, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He didn't know what to say, but he knew that he couldn't keep avoiding the truth. I've been thinking, he began, his voice quieter than usual, about what you said. About humanity's future, about how I fit into all of this. Lyra turned to him, her eyes soft but intense. What have you realized? Ethan took a deep breath. I'm not sure I understand all of it yet, but I'm starting to see it. You keep saying that my emotions, my ability to connect with others is what makes me important. But why me? Why not someone else? There are billions of humans out there. Why am I the one you're focused on? Lyra's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes. Something that seemed to hold a truth that Ethan was still not fully ready to comprehend. You are not the only one, Ethan, she said gently. But you are one of the few. Your emotional depth, your capacity to care, to love, to connect with others is rare. Most of your species does not fully understand what you are capable of. You are capable of emotions that others simply cannot fathom. It is this unique trait that makes humans valuable, and it is this trait that can change everything. Ethan frowned, still trying to wrap his head around it. But what does that mean? How can one person's emotions make a difference to the entire galaxy? What am I supposed to do with that? Lyra's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his. It's not just about you, Ethan, it's about the collective. You are part of a larger movement, a movement to bridge the gap between species, to create a future where emotional intelligence is valued just as much as intelligence or strength. Your role, though difficult to comprehend now, will guide humanity toward a future of peace and understanding with other species. Ethan sat back, processing her words. So you're saying that humanity is on the verge of, what, a new era? One where our feelings matter more than technology or power? Exactly, Lyra replied. It's not that technology or power aren't important, they are. But it's the ability to understand and connect on an emotional level that will allow humanity to thrive in the universe. Your species has a choice. You can choose to evolve beyond your current limitations or be left behind in a galaxy full of beings who have learned to communicate and coexist without the need for war. Without the need for violence, Ethan's mind was reeling. He had always thought of humanity as just a tiny piece of the vast universe, struggling to find its place among the stars. The idea that their emotions, their ability to love, to form bonds, could be the key to their future was something he had never even considered. But I don't know how to do that, Ethan admitted, his voice shaky with uncertainty. I'm just me. I don't know what to do with all this. Lyra smiled gently, understanding his fears. You don't have to know everything right now. No one expects you to have all the answers, but you do have the ability to learn. You already have the foundation, Ethan. The rest will come in time. Ethan looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of the responsibility she was suggesting. It seemed impossible, too big to wrap his mind around. But as he sat there with Lyra beside him, he realized something. He didn't have to understand it all at once. He didn't have to have all the answers. But the connection he felt with her, the sense that they were on the verge of something monumental, was enough to give him hope. How do I start? He asked, his voice steadying as he looked into her eyes. Lyra took a deep breath, her gaze thoughtful. Start by embracing who you are, Ethan. Accept the fact that your emotions, your ability to connect are powerful. You don't need to hide them or push them away. You need to let them guide you. Ethan nodded slowly, a sense of resolve beginning to take root within him. He had spent his life trying to keep things simple, trying to avoid complications. But Lyra's words had unlocked something inside of him. He had always been afraid of his own emotions, afraid of getting too close to others. But now he realized that his feelings, the very things he had tried to protect, could be the key to something greater. As the night stretched on, Ethan felt a shift within himself. The weight of the universe didn't seem as heavy anymore. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time he was ready to face it. With Lyra by his side, he wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to understand the part he had to play in this grand, cosmic story. We'll figure it out together, he said quietly, more to himself than to Lyra. Lyra's smile deepened, her eyes shining with a quiet pride. Yes, we will. Together. And as the stars outside the window seemed to shine a little brighter, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him. There was still much to learn, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He had a purpose, a mission that was greater than he could have ever imagined, and he knew that with Lyra's guidance, he would find the strength to embrace it. Ethan stood at the edge of his room, looking out at the stars through the small window. The galaxy stretched out before him, endless and beautiful, yet it felt like an overwhelming weight on his shoulders. His thoughts were racing. He had come to a decision, but it was a decision that would change everything. Lyra's presence beside him felt like a grounding force. He could feel her eyes on him even though he didn't turn to look. She had been patient with him, always waiting for him to come to his own conclusions, never rushing him. But now the time had come. Ethan, she said softly, her voice a calm reassurance. What will you do? The question echoed in his mind, and he turned to face her. She was standing by the bed, her posture relaxed, yet her expression was filled with a quiet intensity. She had guided him to this point, but now the choice was his to make. Ethan's heart was heavy, but it was also clear. He had spent so many years hiding from the world, hiding from his own emotions, believing that the only way to survive in the vast, cold universe was to remain detached. But now, in Lyra's presence, he understood that survival wasn't enough. It wasn't about staying small, staying safe. It was about embracing the unknown, about stepping into a new chapter of existence, one that was full of possibility, full of potential. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. I've been thinking, Ethan began, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. But I do know one thing. I can't just sit here and let the opportunity pass. I've spent so many years being afraid of everything, and now I see that maybe it's time to stop hiding from it. Lyra's eyes softened as she watched him, a small smile tugging at her lips. She didn't speak, giving him the space to continue. I'm not sure I'm ready for everything you're asking me to do, Ethan continued, his voice wavering slightly. But I know that I want to try. I want to understand. I want to be part of something bigger, something that actually matters. I don't know what that will look like, but I want to find out. Lyra stepped closer to him, her presence overwhelming in the best way possible. You don't have to have it all figured out right now, Ethan, she said gently. That's the beauty of this. It's about the journey. And you're not alone in it. You never will be. Ethan nodded slowly, his mind still processing everything. He could feel the weight of the decision on him, but it wasn't as heavy as it had been before. Lyra had given him a new perspective, a new way of looking at the world. She had opened his eyes to a future that was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. I'm ready, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. I'm ready to step into it, whatever comes next. Lyra's smile widened, and for the first time Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. The fear that had once held him back seemed distant, fading away with every word he spoke. He was no longer the man he had been before Lyra arrived. He was someone new, someone who was ready to embrace whatever came next. Good, Lyra said softly. You're ready to begin, Ethan. The journey you've been preparing for has just started, and I'll be here with you every step of the way. Ethan's heart swelled as he looked at her, a feeling of gratitude washing over him. She had been his guide, his constant support, and now he understood what she had been trying to show him all along. It wasn't just about him. It was about humanity, about the future of his species, about the potential they all had to connect, to evolve, to change the universe. As the silence stretched between them, Ethan felt a quiet determination fill him. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he knew that it was time to take the first step. The unknown no longer felt like something to be feared. It felt like something to be embraced. Where do we go from here? He asked, his voice filled with both excitement and uncertainty. Lyra's eyes sparkled with an emotion Ethan couldn't quite place. We go forward together. There's much to learn, much to discover. The galaxy is full of possibilities, Ethan. And you, humanity, you have the power to change it all. Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of clarity that had eluded him for so long. The path ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. He wasn't alone anymore. Lyra had shown him a new way of looking at the universe, a way that was full of hope and potential. And with her by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As Lyra took his hand, Ethan couldn't help but smile. The stars outside the window seemed to shine a little brighter now, their endless expanse no longer something to fear, but something to explore. Let's do this, he said softly, his voice filled with quiet resolve. Lyra nodded, her smile widening. Together, Ethan. We'll do it together. And as they stood there hand in hand, the vastness of the universe before them, Ethan knew that the future was no longer a distant dream. It was real, and it was within his reach. With Lyra by his side, and the possibilities of the universe before him, he was ready to face whatever came next. And whatever it was, he knew that they would face it together.